Okay, good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday night, so it's halacha and Tanya. We didn't learn Wednesday night class for a few weeks. We're away. But now, last time before we left, we just began the laws of what's called Tevilas, Keilim, immersing Keilim in the Mikvah. But we didn't learn for 3 weeks. We really didn't cover too much that week either. So the bottom line is like this. There's an argument in halacha. There is a concept of what's called Tevilas Keilim. If you buy a utensil that's used for food, you bought it from a guy, and there's different opinions. If the owner of the place was a Jew, but the workers were goyim, many people say you'd have to table it. Even though the owner of the business is a Jew, but the workers that made it, they're goyim. What happens if the owner is a guy and the Jews make it? So again, other opinions say you still have to table it without a bracha. Because the question is, the purpose of why we table Keilim, why we immerse Keilim in the mikveh, we learned last time is, as the Yerushalmi says, to remove it from the impurity of the non-Jew to the purity of a Jew. Because eating is a very important thing. So there's two opinions in halacha if Tevilas Keilim is biblical or is it rabbinic. Some people say it's only rabbinic. Biblically, you don't have to table it. You could use a keli, you could use a vessel without actually having to immerse it in the mikveh. Other people say, no, you're not allowed to use it. It's biblically, you're not allowed to do it. What would be a simple halachic difference, whether it's biblically obligated to immerse Keilim in a mikveh or it's rabbinic? So there'll be a few things. First of all, if it's a doubt, you don't remember if you did it or not. If it's a biblical obligation, then you have to do it again. If it's a rabbinic obligation, so it's a doubt of rabbinic doubt, then you go lenient. Another interesting thing, which I believe we mentioned 3 weeks ago, is what happens if I have a new dish on Shabbos, okay, and I live next to a mikvah. Am I allowed to immerse a dish or a pot in the mikvah on Shabbos? So what's the question over here? We know one of the halachos in Shabbos is you cannot make a non-vessel into a vessel. It's called makah b'patish. You put the finishing touches on the keli. Now you make it usable. Then you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. So now it's like this. If biblically I have to immerse the vessel, that means biblically it's not a vessel. I'm not allowed to use it. What allows me to use it? Putting it in the mikvah. So then I wouldn't be allowed to do it on Shabbos because now I'm making a non-usable keli usable, which is forbidden on Shabbos. If you hold, though, it's only rabbinic, that means biblically it's a vessel. Biblically, I could use it. Biblically, it's a vessel. The Chachamim said you have to table it in the mikvah. So then I would be allowed to table it in the mikvah on Shabbos. The bottom line is Alter Rebbe and many poskim hold that the mitzvah of tabling Keilim in a mikveh is biblical, and therefore you would not be allowed to do it on Shabbos. There are other situations where you could get around it, and we'll get to that later. Now, when you table dishes, it has to be in a mikvah, which is kosher for women. You know, you can't table dishes in a swimming pool. You can't table dishes in a man-made lake, because again, it's not rainwater, it's through pipes and different things. If somebody has a natural lake, they would be able to table dishes in it. Rivers, it's an argument in halacha you could table rivers because some rivers dry up, sometimes they don't dry up. That would be a separate din. But the bottom line is a person has to table dishes in a place which is kosher, in a mikveh which is kosher for women. Meaning it has to be 40 so rainwater or the way a kosher mikveh is built. Now many places, and we know in LA, in New York for sure, you have what's called Keilim mikveh. What does it mean a Keilim mikveh? It's a mikveh made out of rainwater, which is a kosher mikveh. But it has to be made in a certain way, which would be technically a kosher mikveh. But they don't have a filtering system, and the water is cold, and they don't care if it's dirty, because you're putting the dish in it, and then you take it home and you wash it. But the Keilim mikveh as it's known, a mikvah that people have behind shoals or in different places that people are able to table dishes in or pots and pans in. So that would have to be a kosher mikvah. It would actually be rainwater, and it cannot be filtered. If it would be filtered, it automatically loses the status unless if the filter is in the water itself, but they basically not for now. Okay, so therefore, let's discuss which utensils, generally speaking, what materials need to be tabled. So anything of metal needs to be tabled biblically. Glass, something which is glass, needs to be tabled rabbinically. They need to be tabled. You can't use it even once. It's another mistake people make. They think, okay, I could use it once and then I'll go table it. That's not true. A vessel that needs to be immersed in a mikvah cannot even be used once without putting it into the mikvah. So you have to put the keilim in the mikvah. If it's metal, biblically. If it's glass, rabbinically. Now, a wooden utensil or earthenware utensil, meaning made out of clay or ceramic or things like that, do not need to be immersed in the mikvah. But if it's glazed, which most things are today, if it's glazed, so then because of the glass, you need to table it in the mikvah. So if you have a glazed mug, okay, even though it's ceramic, but there's a sheen on it, there's glazed with glass, so that has to be tabled in the mikvah. You're not allowed to use it before. Wood does not have to be tabled. But what happens if on the wood there's some metal? You can have sometimes you have a challah board, right? The beautiful challah board made out of wood. But the side you have glass, or the side you have metal handles, or part of the thing over there is made out of metal. So then that has to be tabled in the mikvah. Anything that food touches directly on, you need to table in the mikvah. So for instance, if you have, but something that the food doesn't actually touch it, that doesn't have to be tabled. So to give you an example, oven racks in an oven, okay? Now you, as a rule, you put a pan in the oven. You don't put food directly on the oven grates. So therefore, the oven grates do not need to be immersed in the mikvah. But if you have a barbecue grill or a broiler pan or a spit, that you put the meat on to roast it, all those things need to be tabled. If you have a barbecue grill that the meat touches the grill, so then you need to table that grill before you use it. Or a broiler pan, they need to be tabled before. If it's an oven rack, again, that you don't put food on directly, or that you're not using it to eat, you don't have to table it. Shelves in the refrigerator are not directly contacting with the food, so you don't have to table the shelves in the refrigerator, or things like that. And the Mitzvah, not this week, next week, there's a whole list already that they give out alphabetically what things need to be tabled, what things, and we're going to go Mitzvah probably next week through that list to go through step by step what needs to be tabled and why, and so on and so forth. Now, when somebody tables a pot or pan or dish, whatever, I'm using the word dish, it's just easier to say. If somebody's tabling a dish, but again, dish means everything that needs to be tabled, cutlery, baking equipment, anything that food touches directly, you need to table. When we were learning the dinim of kasher and Keilim, if you remember, we discussed that if you can't do it at one time, you don't have a pot large enough to do it at one time, you can kasher half at a time. When it comes to immersing vessels in a mikvah, it has to be done at one time. You can't do it half at a time. That means a whole vessel must be immersed in the mikvah at one time. Okay, again, the details of aluminum trays and all, we're going to discuss in Mitzvah next week. Today we're learning the general rules of how to table and what needs to be tabled. So you need to table it at one time, okay? Which means that if you're holding on to the dish when you put it into the water, that part of the dish that your hand is holding is not getting wet with the water from the mikvah. That could be a problem. Now, there are opinions in halacha that say that if I immerse my hand first in the mikvah, immerse until the wrist, I immerse my hand in the mikvah. Then when I hold the keilim, then when I hold the dish, it's not a problem even if I don't let go. But ideally, a person, when they're tabling dishes, should let go for a second. It's not going to go anywhere. Just let go for a second and right away get it. And then you know that the water touched the whole utensil. If part of the vessel was out of the water, no good. You have to table it again. Another important din that happens, and I just got a bunch of phone calls about this the other day, there cannot be anything separating between the water of the mikvah and the pan or the dish. Meaning, a lot of times we're blessed in today's society, you buy a glass dish and there's a little sticker underneath it, or a pan or whatever it is. They have these stickers. And for whatever reason it's sometimes very difficult to take them off. The problem is, if you table a dish with that sticker on it, you have to table it again, because the place where the sticker is, that part of the vessel didn't come in touch with the water. And if it didn't come in touch with the water, you didn't table the keilim at the one time. So it's no good. So you have to make sure. Somebody just called me the other day. They went to table a bunch of dishes. And when they came home, they noticed every one of the things they tabled had a little sticker at the bottom. And sometimes they're clear. So you don't notice them when you look at the thing. You don't notice it. But then you come home and you see that there's a little sticker on it. So you have to be very careful when there's a sticker that you make sure the sticker comes off. And also sometimes, when I don't know why they make them like this, but when they take off a sticker, it doesn't come off easily. So there's a little bit of glue left, there's a little bit of white left, whatever it is. In all these cases, when you immerse keilim in a mikvah, you have to make sure they're spotlessly clean. There's no dirt, there's no stickers, there's no nothing. Otherwise, it's not a kosher immersion, and you have to do it again. And you can't use the keilim until it's tabled. Now, some people, when they table dishes, make a bracha al tevilas keilim, or if it's many al tevilas keilim. Some don't. They're just different customs, because some people say we don't know who owns the companies now. Even the company is made in China, but there could be Jews owning the company. We don't know. Some people make a bracha when they table dishes. In fact, most people do. Some people don't. And as we learn, we'll see certain things, according to all opinions, you table without a bracha, because it's questionable if they really need to be immersed in the mikvah. Okay, now another interesting thing. What happens, can I have a kid? Can I have my 11-year-old, 12-year-old under bar and bas mitzvah? Can I have them table dishes for me? So the din is yes and no. What do you mean yes and no? Yes means technically they could table it. They could immerse it in the mikvah. The problem is they're not believed to say that they did it. So therefore, what happens if an adult is there in the mikvah with the kids? And the adult is standing over them, and he sees the way the kids are tabling the dishes properly. So then that's fine. In other words, it's not that a kid can't table the dishes. A child is not believed as a witness, because it's a testimony to say that I did it. So that testimony, a kid is a kid. A kid is not a kosher witness. So therefore, the kid is not believed. But if an adult is standing there and watching the way the kid did it, so then there wouldn't be any issue with it whatsoever. Okay, another interesting thing. There's a lot of dinim here with Okay. Now, what do you do? And this is a very big issue in today's world. What do you do with appliances that are metal? I mean, that are electrical. You have an electric kettle. You have an electric urn. You have electric today. A lot of blenders. I mean, a lot of things are electrical. And they're right, do not immerse. Okay, so now the question is, how do I table an electric kettle or an urn? I'm just using that as a practical example. It could be any electrical appliance. So if there are pieces that come out, those pieces for sure have to be tabled. Parts that are not touching the food doesn't have to be tabled. I'll give you an example. You have a blender, okay? So you have the machinery of the blender, and then you have the glass container or the plastic container, okay, that has the blades on it. Now the blades are metal. That for sure needs to be tabled. So the glass container needs to be tabled. Even if it's plastic, our custom is if it's hard plastic, we table it for sure without a bracha. But the question is, and the blender, the electrical part, never comes in contact with food. So you don't have to table the electrical part of the blender. But you have a lot of other electrical appliances that, what do you do? How do you table a kettle? How do you table it? So there's three opinions in halacha what you should do. Because it says do not immerse in water. So one opinion said, a lot of opinions say, by the way, you table it in the mikvah anyway. Get it wet and let it dry out for a number of days. And hope that it didn't break. Okay, but many people, by the way, they'll take a blow dryer, a blow dryer, and they'll dry out where the holes are to make sure that it gets dried out. So that's what the best, halachically, the best thing is to do that. But the problem is, it might get ruined. Then Rabbi Yosef Feinstein holds that you table everything except the electrical part. Now, it's immersed, let's say, the urn. You immerse the whole urn side of the urn, outside of the urn, but not the electrical part. He said that you don't have to immerse. And then there's a third eitzah of the Minchas Yitzchak, which is a very practical eitzah. And that is, and let me preface it with another din. There's a din in halacha that if a Jew borrows a vessel from a guy, it's kosher, let's say, never used it. I borrow a vessel from a non-Jew, I don't have to table it in the mikvah. It's not mine. I'm just borrowing it. In fact, there's a din in Shulchan Aruch. Now, the Rebbe brings it down also. What happens if it's late on Erev Shabbos and you need a certain dish for Shabbos, a certain pan or whatever, and it wasn't tabled, and it's before Shabbos? So then the Alter Rebbe says, other poskim also, you can give it to a guy as a present, because then it becomes the guy's. But he has to pick it up, and he actually has to acquire it. After the guy acquires it, now you borrow it back from the guy indefinitely. So basically, what are you doing? All you're doing is borrowing a non-Jew's vessel. It's kosher because it's yours. It's brand new. No problem with treif and kosher. But the guy acquires it, but the guy has to acquire it. It has to be his. You can't say, okay, here, I'm giving it to you. The guy has to pick it up, and he has to understand that what I'm doing, but this is the din in Shulchan Aruch by Erev Shabbos. So if it's very late in Erev Shabbos, and you need it for Shabbos, so the Chachamim were lenient that you can give it to a guy as a present. The guy acquires it, and then you borrow it back from the guy for Shabbos. Then the din is, after Shabbos, you have to table it in the mikvah. Because now you could already. So you have that only works for Shabbos because you have no choice. So the Minchas Yitzchak, Dayan Weiss, and a lot of poskim hold, so because it's an electrical appliance, and you really have no choice, because you can't really immerse it, it says do not immerse. So therefore, he maintains that this is an eitzah that works. And that is, you give it to the guy, you take an urn, you need a guy that, that knows you. And you give the guy, tell the guy, listen, for Jewish purposes, religious purposes, whatever, I need to give you this urn as a gift, and I'm going to borrow it back from you indefinitely forever. So you give the guy the urn, picks it up, he acquires it, and then now you borrow it back, and now you don't have to table it anymore because it's really owned by the guy. It's not yours. You're just borrowing it. And the din is, if you borrow a vessel from a guy, you don't have to table it. Okay, that's as far as the eights of what to do with electrical appliances. Now, what happened? You have to be very careful that, again, the vessel has to be clean. Not only those, it has to be clean. You can't table a dirty, because then there's a separation between the materials. Just to get some more practical dinim of this. Okay, pots and pans made out of cooking. Okay, that needs to be tabled. Peelers, anything that touches food, salt, sugar, spice shakers needs to be. I'm not going into details generally. Water kettles, aluminum pots, and okay. So now there's another interesting shaila, and many people are makel and others are not. We have today the disposable aluminum foil trays, the disposable ones. So now the question is, it's metal. Aluminum is really metal. So the question is, do you have to table them or not? Okay, you buy in the Smart and Final, you buy in the store, aluminum, Costco, wherever you go. You buy these aluminum trays, but they're metal, and you're going to put chicken in there, you're going to put noodles in it, whatever, you're putting food in it. So the question is, do they need to be tabled? So there are opinions that say, yeah, you need to table it before you use it. Period. It's metal, you need to table. Other opinions say that if you use it only once, you don't have to table it. Why? Because they're made to throw out. It's made as a disposable thing. So therefore, it doesn't really have the law of a proper vessel because it's made to throw out. So therefore, they say, if you use it once, then you don't have to table it. But if you're going to use it a few times, many opinions say, then you would have to table it. Because now you're not using it only once. You're not throwing it out after one time. You're using it a few times, you would have to table it. And there are many opinions today say, no, even if you reuse it, but the fact that it was made as disposable, it's made to throw out, so therefore it doesn't really have a din of a Keilim. Okay? Okay. But let's say, I'm just looking general guidelines here of what need in the dinim of okay. Now some other dinim about table and Keilim in from Kitzur Shulchan. Now, if you have a vessel that's very narrow, the mouth of the vessel is very narrow, like a soda bottle. Okay. If you have a soda bottle, so then you have to make sure that the water goes in all at one time, that the vessel is full. That because again, that has to be full inside and outside. When you table a dish, it has to be filled with water inside and outside. So you have to make sure that the whole keli is submerged in the water. Okay. And then what some people do, some people have a minig to table everything 3 times. So really what you have to do is just, let's say you have it's full of water, just pick it up a little bit out of the water, so then it's not immersed anymore, and you put it back into the water. But again, you have to make sure that every part of it is submerged in the water. Okay, we said that about the kids. Now, what happens? This is a very important thing, by the way. What happens if you go to somebody's now? Okay, let's go back a step. You buy a can of soda, okay, or a bottle of soda, or a bottle of drinks. That's glass. Okay, it's glass. So now the question is, how can I drink it? The can wasn't tabled. The can wasn't tabled. So the answer is, I didn't put the liquid in there. In other words, the food doesn't become treif because it's in a non-immersed vessel. The food doesn't become treif. If the food was in there before, you could drink from the bottle. Or you have a jar of pickles that's glass. Yeah, you can eat the pickles out of the glass, even though the glass wasn't tabled, because it's you didn't put the food in there, number one. In other words, the mitzvah of Tevilas Keilim is an obligation on the person to immerse the stuff in the mikvah. It doesn't negate, it doesn't ruin the food's kashrus. So I know the Rebbe did tell somebody once asked the Rebbe, they go to people's houses and they ask, they offer you a cup of tea. The Keilim are not in the mikvah. Okay. And the Rebbe told people it's not so, it's not so terrible. It's glass. Glass is not biblical. It's only rabbinic. It's not biblical. And even with kashrus, it's not, the issur is not that the food must be in immersed mikvah. There's a din on the person, you have to table the dish. If there's food in the dish from before, if somebody by mistake put food in there, so the food's not treif, you can still use the food or the drink or whatever it may be. So these are the general dinim of Tevilas Keilim. In fact, there's a whole sefer this thick just on the laws of Tevilas Keilim. There's a lot of laws. We're just covering the basics things, and that's it. Okay, so now we're going to go to Tanya. And next week we'll go through the details of the dishes, of the utensils, which do need to be, for instance, you have there's bottle caps, bottle openers. I mean, a lot of dinim that the Mitzvah next week we will discuss.